My name is Jack Miller, and until recently, I was an ordinary man living what most would call a perfect life. I had a successful career as a lawyer in Chicago, a spacious home that I built with my own hands, and a wife, Emily, whom I loved and trusted deeply. She was my world, the foundation of my happiness. But life, as I would soon discover, has a cruel way of shattering illusions. It all began on an overcast Saturday morning, the kind of day that whispers unease. The sky turned gray without warning, and a steady drizzle soon enveloped the city. I had planned to spend the day on the golf course, my sacred escape from the chaos of work. The rhythmic precision of each swing, the satisfying thud of the ball, always helped me find peace. So, despite the weather, I grabbed my clubs and headed out, thinking the rain would be a minor inconvenience. By the time I reached the third hole, the drizzle had turned into a relentless downpour. Frustrated but resigned, I decided to call it a day and head home. As I drove through the rain-slicked streets, an inexplicable sense of dread began to creep in. It was nothing I could pinpoint, just a vague, unsettling feeling that I couldn't shake. When I arrived home, the first thing I noticed was the quiet. Too quiet. Emily had a habit of calling out to me, her voice warm and affectionate, the moment I stepped through the door. But today, there was no greeting. The garage door was open, yet her car was missing. Something was wrong. I entered through the back door, my footsteps echoing in the stillness of the house. As I walked into the living room, I stopped dead in my tracks. The scene before me was surreal, like something out of a nightmare. Emily was lying on the sofa, wearing nothing but her underwear. Sitting beside her, equally underdressed, was Michael Harris, her colleague and a man I had considered a close friend. Their eyes were locked in an intimate gaze, a silent conversation that spoke volumes. My heart felt like it had been torn from my chest. Every glance, every movement between them was a betrayal that shattered the life I had built piece by piece. For a moment, time stood still. Emily noticed me standing there frozen, and her reaction was not one of guilt or panic. Instead, she rose gracefully, brushed her hair aside, and looked at me with a cold, almost indifferent expression. "Aren't you going to say anything?" she asked, her tone laced with sarcasm and defiance. I struggled to find my voice, my thoughts swirling in a storm of disbelief and fury. The only words I could manage were, "Get out." Michael scrambled to gather his clothes, his face pale and full of embarrassment. He bolted from the house without a word. Emily, however, remained where she was, staring at me with eyes that held no regret, only a faint, twisted sorrow. "Don't you have anything to say?" she pressed again, her voice unwavering. I clenched my fists, each word dripping with quiet rage. "Get out. I'll pack your things and leave them in the garage. You can pick them up later." She opened her mouth as if to speak, but I turned away, unwilling to hear whatever excuse or justification she might offer. My decision was final. As I walked to my study, I dialed Michael's wife, Irene. The sound of her calm but bitter voice on the other end of the line was both a relief and a weight. She had suspected something was amiss, but hadn't imagined it would be this. "Thank you for calling," she said, her tone steady but icy. "I had a feeling something was wrong, but now I know. We've both been betrayed." Her words struck a chord deep within me. "They'll pay for this," I said, my voice low and resolute. What followed was a blur of decisions driven by anger and pain. Irene and I quickly formed an alliance, bound by mutual betrayal and a shared thirst for justice. As the rain outside intensified, we began planning our response with meticulous care. Every piece of evidence I had, emails, messages, photos, became part of our arsenal. Irene, equally determined, started digging into Emily's finances while I worked to uncover every detail of their deceit. Hours passed as we pieced together the puzzle, driven by a relentless need to expose the truth. Irene's calm determination was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me, but her presence was a source of strength. We didn't need to speak much. Our actions were enough. At one point, I called Sarah, Emily's best friend, hoping to gain insight into her social circle. Sarah had always been close to Emily, and though I doubted she was involved, she might have seen or heard something. The conversation was strained, filled with unspoken tension. Each moment felt surreal, like living in a parallel reality where my once perfect life had crumbled into a cruel joke. Yet beneath the pain, a new resolve began to take shape. I would not let this betrayal define me. Emily and Michael had made their choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. As the rain pounded against the windows, I knew one thing for certain. This storm, both inside and out, would not pass quietly. I would see to it that the consequences of their actions were felt deeply, and I wouldn't rest until justice was served. My name is Jack Miller. On the surface, I was an ordinary man with an extraordinary life. I had built everything I dreamed of. A stable career as a lawyer in Chicago, a spacious house crafted with my own hands, and Emily, my wife and the center of my universe. I trusted her implicitly, loved her deeply. To me, our life was perfect. That illusion shattered on a seemingly ordinary Saturday morning. The day began with unexpected rain drenching the city, the kind of storm that rolls in without warning. Despite the gloomy skies, I decided to escape to my sanctuary, the golf course. Golf had always been my way of untangling the stress of work, my moment of peace. But that day, peace eluded me. The rain grew heavier, forcing me to cut my game short. As I drove home, an inexplicable unease took hold of me. It was subtle at first, like a faint whisper, but it intensified with every mile. When I arrived, the eerie silence of my house only deepened the foreboding. Emily, who always greeted me with warmth, was nowhere to be seen. The garage door was open, yet her car was gone. Something was wrong. I entered through the back door, calling her name. No answer. My footsteps echoed in the stillness until they carried me into the living room. And there she was, Emily. She was lounging on the sofa, her body barely covered in lingerie. Sitting next to her, equally undressed, was Michael Harris, her colleague and someone I had once called a friend. The sight was like a dagger to the chest. They didn't flinch when they saw me, didn't even scramble to hide their betrayal. Emily stood slowly, brushing her hair aside with casual indifference. Her eyes met mine, cold and devoid of remorse. "Aren't you going to say anything?" she asked, her tone sharp, almost mocking. My voice failed me. I stood frozen, my world unraveling in a single moment. Finally, with every ounce of strength I had, I muttered, "Get out." Michael grabbed his clothes and hurriedly left, avoiding my gaze. Emily, however, stayed. She didn't beg, didn't apologize. She simply stared, her silence filled with an arrogance that stoked my rage. "You too," I said firmly. "Get out. I'll pack your things. You can pick them up later." Her lips parted as if to speak, but I wasn't interested in hearing excuses. I turned away, each step heavy with the weight of betrayal. I didn't stop until I reached my office. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone and called Michael's wife, Irene. When she answered, her voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of pain. "Thanks for calling," she said after I told her everything. "I had a feeling something was wrong, but I didn't expect this." Her voice hardened. "We need to make them pay." And so the plan began. Irene and I joined forces, both of us driven by a shared sense of betrayal. In the hours that followed, I uncovered evidence, emails, texts, financial transactions, that painted a clear picture of their deceit. Irene worked with equal fervor, delving into Michael's financials. We became an unrelenting team, bound by the need for justice. One of my first steps was calling Emily's best friend, Sarah. She had always been close to Emily, and I needed to know if she had been complicit. To my surprise, Sarah was horrified when she learned the truth. "Jack," she said, her voice heavy with guilt, "I had no idea. But Emily is clever. She always keeps everything under control. Don't let her regain the upper hand. Her words stuck with me. Emily was calculating, always a step ahead. But not this time. I enlisted a trusted lawyer to prepare the groundwork for a legal confrontation. Irene and I meticulously pieced together a case against them. Every document, every transaction, every damning detail. Our first major move came one evening at an upscale restaurant where Michael was meeting business associates. Irene and I arrived unannounced, blending into the crowd. From our table, we watched him, confident and unaware of the storm about to descend. When he finally noticed us, his expression shifted from confusion to unease. "Jack," he said, his voice tight, "what are you doing here?" I leaned forward, my gaze steady. "We need to talk, Michael." Irene placed a thick folder on the table. Inside were records of his secret dealings, his financial entanglements with Emily, and proof of their affair. His composure cracked as he leafed through the documents. "This is only the beginning," I said coldly. "Cooperate or this goes public." Michael didn't respond. He stood abruptly and left, his bravado shattered. Watching him retreat was a small victory, but it was far from the end. Emily, too, began to unravel. She called me repeatedly, her voice trembling with desperation. "Jack, please," she begged. "We can fix this. I made a mistake." Her words felt hollow. "You didn't make a mistake," I replied. "You made a choice, and now you'll face the consequences." The legal battle was grueling but methodical. My lawyer and I dismantled the life Emily and I had built together, piece by piece. The court reviewed the hidden accounts, the transactions she had tried to bury, and the assets she had no right to claim. Emily, who once seemed untouchable, was now exposed. As the months passed, I found a strange sense of peace. It wasn't the revenge that soothed me. It was the act of reclaiming my life. The betrayal had broken me, but it didn't define me. I had faced the storm and emerged stronger. When the court ruling came, it was clear justice had been served. Emily and Michael had nothing left but the ruins of their deceit. As I stood in my empty house, I realized that I wasn't mourning what I had lost. I was celebrating what I had regained, my dignity, my strength, and my freedom. Betrayal can shatter you, but only if you let it. I chose to rise, and in doing so, I became the master of my own story.